Alright, so before the video starts, I kind of want to give you guys like a little background, but if you really don't care about this, you can just skip to the next part of the video where I actually start. So lately I've been getting more into mechanical keyboards, and I've just been kind of liking them as a hobby. And about a year and a half ago, I got my first mechanical keyboard when I built this PC. And that mechanical keyboard was a Redragon K582. So obviously it's not the best mechanical keyboard because at the time I didn't really care about keyboards, but at the same time I did want a mechanical keyboard. And I think I made a really good decision because I didn't want to spend much on one, but I got one anyway. And for the price, it's a very good keyboard because it's only 50 bucks. 50 bucks would buy you like a really good membrane keyboard and a pretty low quality mechanical keyboard, but not really low quality. I mean, compared to expensive mechanical keyboards, obviously it's not the best. But I'm glad that I made the decision to go with the mechanical keyboard. And as I was saying before, I've been getting into it more, so I want to lube my switches because I've recently been enlightened with the whole custom keyboard community stuff on YouTube. I didn't even know that that community like even existed on YouTube before this, but I just only heard about it like a couple of weeks ago. And the keyboard that I have uses Outemu Red Switches, which is probably the cheapest switch you can buy. I mean, they're very cheap switches. It's essentially a cherry profile switch, but they are very cheap. So the first thing I needed to do was take off the keycaps, and I did this off camera. I didn't record any footage of this. To take off the keycaps, of course, any normal person would just use a keycap remover, and my box, or my keyboard, actually came with a keycap remover and a switch remover, or I don't know what you call those things, but the thing that used to take the switch out of the keyboard. But me, 1.5 years ago, thought, oh, I probably don't need this, so I threw them out. So what did I use to take off the keycaps, you might ask? Yeah, a paperclip. I literally just yanked them off with the paperclip, like... Now, at first, I thought the switches were soldered on, so I thought I needed to open the whole keyboard and desolder. Turns out this keyboard is actually hot swap, so I could just literally pop out the switches because the PCB is a hot swap PCB. That makes it a lot easier for me, especially because I'm a beginner and this is my first mechanical keyboard. So, to take out the switches, any normal, sane person would just use a switch puller, and especially because my keyboard came with one, but once again, I threw that out. So what did I use to take the switches out? Yep, a flathead screwdriver. Oh, I think I broke a couple of switches, or I kind of damaged the lower housing of a couple of switches. I don't really care because these switches are really cheap and they're still gonna work. And obviously my case is plastic because you can't have a $50 keyboard with a metal case. And yeah, when I was taking off the switches on the bottom row, you can see I left dents on there. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm probably just gonna put like a black piece of tape there to somewhat cover that up because it's a $50 keyboard. I don't really, it's not that I don't care about it, but it's not, I'm not gonna treat it like a $500 like aluminum brass keyboard with holy pandas. Now that I have all the switches taken out, I need to actually open the switches because if I want to lube the switches, you can't really lube switches without opening them. Now, any normal sane person would get a switch opener, but the thing is, with Outemu switches, I don't think they make switch openers for Outemu switches. And I think the actual profile of Outemu switches, or I think the housings of Outemu switches, I don't think they're the same as cherry housings, so you can't really use any switch opener in production right now. So you need to open the switches using other tools. And at first I tried to open the switch with the same flathead screwdriver I tried to yank the switches out with. But then I figured out that, no, that just jabs my fingers way too much and that's going to take forever. What I actually did was buy a screwdriver set on Amazon. And this was the smallest screwdriver set I could find. The smallest screwdriver in the set has a diameter of 0.8 millimeters. I actually used a combination of two screwdrivers. So my method here was basically on one side of the housing, just jab the screwdriver in there, kind of leave it up like that, and then do the same thing with the other side of the housing, and then kind of tilt the screwdriver inwards so the top housing pops off from the lower housing. And this method actually works out quite well. So I essentially just did this for every switch. And my keyboard is a full 104 key set. Honestly, now I would probably get like a 60% keyboard, but at the time I thought I needed a whole 104 set keyboard, so I have to lube 104 keys and I need to take out all the 104 keys. And then essentially I did this for every switch, and then I put them into these coffee filters to separate them. So I put the spring in one, the upper housing in one, lower housing in one, and stem in the other. And then I waited for my lube to arrive, and then from there on I'm going to lube the switches, and I'm going to put them back together, and I'm going to reassemble the keyboard. So there's actually one more thing we need to do before lubing, and that is taking out the stabilizers. So my stabilizers are plate mounted as opposed to PCB mounted, and that makes sense because plate mounted stabilizers are cheaper. And I'm guessing these are Outemu brand stabilizers, but these are MX style stabilizers, but they are made by Outemu. And because these are plate-mounted stabilizers, to take them off, all you need to do is really just push in those two tabs, and then it just comes right off, and I just use the same flathead screwdriver for that. Now, a thing with my stabilizers is that they are very wobbly. I mean, plate-mounted stabilizers in general are really wobbly. And what a lot of people do is they band-aid the stabilizers, which is basically just putting a band-aid or a piece of tape below the stabilizer so it doesn't rattle around too much. Because if you look at my stabilizer, yeah, that's a little ridiculous, and they also don't sound very great. So basically, I took out all of the stabilizers, and then I wanted to band-aid them. So essentially, I took some duct tape, and I literally just cut up pieces of duct tape, and then I put one tiny piece of duct tape on the top of where one stabilizer would be, and then the bottom of where the stabilizer would be, and I did this for every stabilizer on my keyboard. And this is how much band-aiding your stabilizers reduces the wobble. Like, it insanely reduces the wobble. And this is how it sounds like. And of course, I didn't lube them yet. So band-aiding them greatly improves them. And also, with all the stabilizers out, of course you need to disassemble them in order to lube them. So disassembling a stabilizer is way easier than disassembling a switch. All you need to do is hold on to one leg of the stabilizer and turn the bar about 90 degrees. And then that kind of separates the stabilizer housing and stem from the bar. And of course you do this with the other side as well. And from there you are left with 5 pieces. And these 5 pieces are the 2 stems, the 2 housings, and the bar. And then from there on you can just lube all the individual components of the stabilizers. And then I also like to leave one for reference. Also, something I don't know if I mentioned before is I'm also going to film the switches. And here is the film that I'm going to be using. I just kind of wanted to show that just to put it out there. Now, another thing is these feet on the stabilizers are kind of useless because the idea of having them is so the stabilizer doesn't damage the PCB when you bottom it out. But honestly, unless you regularly whack your stabilizers with a hammer, your PCB is not going to get damaged because you bottom out your stabilizers too hard. And typically those feet actually make the bottoming out sound of the stabilizer a little bit worse. So people like to cut them off because first of all they're useless because your PCB is not going to get damaged, and it also kind of degrades the sound of your stabilizers. But honestly, I don't think I'm going to cut them off personally because I really don't think they're going to degrade the sound all that much, and at the same time I don't have wire cutters and I don't really want to do it with scissors. And also, with all those dents that were made earlier, I basically just took a piece of paper and I kind of colored it black, and then I taped that piece of paper onto the rim of the case. Alright, and now for the actual lubing. So you can see I got my Krytox 205 grade 0, and I'm actually going to lube one switch on camera and one stabilizer on camera, and I'm just going to finish the rest off camera, but I am going to do a little bit of a time lapse to show me lubing a couple more of the switches. So the first thing I did when lubing the switches is I took a lower housing, I took a little bit of lube from the container, and then I started applying it to the 2 rails of the lower housing. And then from there, I took quite a generous amount of lube onto the springs, and then I lubed the bottom of the spring and the top of the spring, and then I put that on the lower housing. And then I lubed the stem. So I lubed the 2 sides that go on the rails, as well as the actual feet that come into contact with the contact, as well as the other side. I was pretty generous with lubing the feet because, I mean, these are linear switches if you couldn't tell, so you want linear switches to be smooth no matter what. But if I had tactile switches, then I probably wouldn't lube the feet on the back. Or not even the feet, those little prongs, I don't know what you call them. And then, of course, I realized that I forgot to film the switches, so I opened it up again and I put a piece of film on the switch. Oh, I forgot to film them. That's the good thing I remembered. What film did I use, you might ask? Well, I don't know, I got it on Amazon. It was probably some rip-off brand, but it still works though. The films work, I can tell you now. And then I lubed the stabilizers. So the first thing I did was lube the housing of the stabilizer. So I just took, not really a generous amount of lube, about the same amount of lube I used for the stem of the switches. And then I just started applying that to both of the housings. And with the bars of the stabilizers, yeah, I was pretty generous there. I took a lot of lube on the stabilizer bar because it eliminates the rattling. Well, it doesn't completely eliminate it, but it brings it down by a lot. And then that's all I'm lubing with the stabilizers, just the housings and the bars. Of course, both housings and both sides of the bars. I'm not going to lube the stabilizer stems. And then here is the time lapse of me lubing a couple of more switches. And something I kind of want to mention is that the actual lube itself, or the container of lube, is like this small. This thing is much smaller than I thought. I thought it would be a lot bigger. This fits in my hand, like just like in the palm of my hand like that. So I thought they would give you a lot more lube actually, and they give you a lot less than I thought. The amount of lube they give you is good for maybe like a 65% keyboard or something like that. Because, at least for me, I did not have enough lube to completely lube everything. And that kind of surprised me because I thought they would give you more lube, so I guess that's just a heads up. Either that or I overlubed, but I don't think I overlubed. I mean, maybe I overlubed a little bit on some of the switches, but I don't think I overlubed that much that I didn't have enough lube for my whole keyboard. So maybe if you have a 104 key keyboard and you want to lube it and you want to make sure everything is lubed, you can get 2 things of lube. But what I actually ended up doing was I ended up not lubing the function keys and the number pad. I actually did lube the function keys that I use. So out of the number pad and the function keys and the navigation keys, I only really used the delete key, F1, F2, F3, F5. And that's really all I use, so there isn't really a need to lube everything. But all of the letters, numbers, everything on the main part of the keyboard, I have that lubed. And another thing is when I was opening the switches, if you guys remember at the beginning of the video, I broke a couple of lower housings. Not broke to the point where it was just like unusable, just broke to the point where it was very unpleasant. And since I'm too cheap and I don't want to buy more switches to replace them, I just reassemble them and I put them on the number pad because I never use the number pad ever. So having the broken switches on the number pad I think was a fine idea because I never use it anyway. At this point, the number pad is honestly just there for aesthetic. And finally, I think you guys have been waiting for this, maybe not, I don't know, a sound test. So this is going to be a sound test from Monkey Type, and this is the 25-word mode. And I'm sorry, I probably don't have great settings on my mic, but here we go anyway. Okay, so I actually didn't really document me putting the keyboard back together, but this is how it looks like, and I'm filming for my webcam, and this is plugged in, so this is not a great shot, but yes, this is how the keyboard looks like when it's fully reassembled. Yeah, you can hear the lubed keys, and you can also see how the films work well, because like when I try to wobble, it might not look so obvious on camera, but like in real life you can tell this is seriously like a lot less wobble. And also, yeah, I reversed the direction of my spacebar. I think it's actually a lot better like this, because you could actually press it with your thumb easier when you're typing. So some keys, of course, as I mentioned before, like on the number pad, don't really work well. And I also think I overlubed the left shift. I don't know, I think it's fine. I think I might switch it with the right shift because I use the left shift more than right shift, so I think I could just swap the two. So yeah, of course, this wasn't super successful. This wasn't 100% successful. I was unprepared for quite a bit of things, but I think the overall result, I'm very pleased with it, definitely. Like, it sounds so much better, it feels so much better, and after 2 weeks of using that membrane keyboard, which I didn't show in this video, but I had to use this, like, old membrane keyboard for 2 weeks, and yeah, no, that was not great. But this is, like, amazing after that, and especially now it's, like, freshly lubed and everything. It does kind of annoy me, like, a little bit. I don't know, it's just kind of a small pet peeve in a way that not every switch is perfect here, even though I don't use it. I don't know why. It's like, even though, like, F5, F6, like, you can see they're unlubed, but, why do I care? I don't know, because I never use them, but it's just kind of small imperfections make me a little bit crazy, but that's okay, because I'm very happy with this keyboard overall. Okay, so that is the full-on documentary of me lubing my keyboard. So hopefully this was somewhat enjoyable and not very excruciating. I actually do want to do a full sound test on my other channel, so that might be coming out. If I don't do one, I'm sorry, then ignore this, but if I do make one, I'll definitely link it here, and I'll probably put it on the end card. So with all of that out of the way, thank you for watching, and goodbye.